If the sun were to suddenly vanish, the effects on Earth would be felt immediately. The first thing we'd notice is complete darkness. The sky would lose its familiar blue color, turning pitch black as the sun's light stopped reaching our atmosphere. The moon, which only shines because it reflects sunlight, would also go completely dark. The only sources of natural light left would be the stars in the night sky, but even they wouldn't be enough to brighten our world. Within just a few minutes, temperatures would begin to drop. The sun's warmth is what keeps our planet at a livable temperature, and without it, Earth would start to cool rapidly. In the first 24 hours, temperatures would fall below freezing in most places, making it difficult for humans, animals, and plants to survive outdoors. But the biggest and most immediate change would be in gravity. The sun's immense gravitational pull keeps Earth and the rest of the solar system in orbit. If the sun were to suddenly disappear, Earth would no longer be held in place and would begin moving in a straight line through space. At first, we wouldn't notice this movement, as everything on Earth would still feel normal, but over time, our planet would drift farther and farther away from where it once was, no longer bound to the solar system we know. Another major consequence would be the sudden halt of photosynthesis. Plants rely on sunlight to create energy, and without it, they would be unable to grow or produce oxygen. This process stops almost immediately, meaning the air we breathe would slowly begin to change. While we wouldn't run out of oxygen right away, over time the balance of gases in the atmosphere would shift, making it harder for life to continue as it does now. As the hours passed, the oceans would begin to respond to the lack of sunlight. The surface water, which is warmed by the sun, would start to cool, and within a few days, ice would begin forming in many regions. Ocean currents, which rely on temperature differences between warm and cold water, would start to weaken, disrupting marine ecosystems and weather patterns across the globe. The sudden loss of the sun would also cause panic among humans. Cities would be plunged into darkness, and many of the technologies we rely on would begin to fail. Solar panels would become useless, and plants grown indoors under artificial light would struggle as energy production declined. Governments and scientists would scramble to find solutions, but the reality is that there would be no easy fix for the absence of the sun. In the first few days, people would try to continue their daily routines, but the drop in temperature, food supply issues, and overall fear of the unknown would quickly change how society functioned. Without sunlight, people would experience severe disruptions to their sleep cycles, leading to exhaustion and confusion. Crops would begin to wither, and farmers would be left with no way to grow new food. This would just be the beginning. The loss of the sun would continue to impact Earth in ways that are difficult to fully comprehend. Next, we'll explore how our planet would change in the weeks and months following the sun's disappearance, as the world transforms into an unrecognizable frozen wasteland. As the first few weeks passed, the full impact of the sun's disappearance would become undeniable. The world would be locked in darkness, with no sunrise to mark the passage of time. Without the sun's warmth, temperatures would continue to drop at an alarming rate. Most regions would be far below freezing, and many parts of the world would already be experiencing conditions colder than anything recorded in human history. The oceans, which had already started to cool in the first few days, would now be undergoing a dramatic transformation. The surface waters in most areas would freeze over, forming thick layers of ice. However, the deeper parts of the ocean would remain liquid for a while longer, thanks to the heat stored in Earth's core. This would create an eerie contrast: vast, frozen landscapes above the surface, while some marine life still struggled to survive in the remaining pockets of warmth below. But even these deep waters would not stay habitable for long, as the lack of sunlight meant that ocean currents had nearly stopped, cutting off the flow of nutrients that sea life depends on. On land, the situation would be just as bleak. Without sunlight, the last remaining plant life would have died off. Trees, grass, and crops would be lifeless and brittle, frozen in the bitter cold. The loss of vegetation would set off a devastating chain reaction in the food chain. Herbivores, already weakened by the harsh conditions, would begin to die off without food. As a result, carnivores that relied on them for sustenance would soon follow. Within weeks, the majority of animal species would be struggling to survive, and many would already be extinct. Humans, too, would be facing extreme challenges. Cities would be covered in ice and snow, and many structures would be collapsing under the weight of the frozen environment. Transportation would become nearly impossible, as fuel supplies froze and roads were buried under thick layers of ice. Electricity, already unreliable due to the loss of solar energy, would now be failing in most areas. Without power, people would be forced to find alternative ways to stay warm, relying on burning whatever fuel they could find. The lack of light would also begin affecting human psychology in profound ways. People depend on natural light to regulate their internal body clocks, and without it, sleep cycles would become completely disrupted. Depression, confusion, and panic would become widespread. In an effort to maintain some sense of normalcy, people might attempt to create artificial lighting systems, but these would be temporary solutions to a much larger problem. As governments and scientists scrambled to come up with survival plans, underground shelters would likely become a last resort. The heat from Earth's core would provide some warmth beneath the surface, and some groups might attempt to relocate to deep underground facilities. However, this would not be a long-term solution for the entire human population, and supplies would quickly run out. By the end of the first month, Earth would be nearly unrecognizable. The planet would be a frozen wasteland, with temperatures plunging to levels far too extreme for most life to endure. The last surviving humans and animals would be desperately clinging to the few remaining sources of heat, while the planet itself continued its silent drift through the darkness of space. As we continue, we'll explore what would happen in the months and years that followed. If life had any chance of survival, where would it be? And how long could Earth sustain itself without the sun? As the months stretched on, Earth would continue its descent into an icy oblivion. The planet, once teeming with life, would be almost entirely frozen over. The surface temperatures would have dropped to levels colder than anything ever recorded, making survival nearly impossible outside of artificially heated environments. Most of the remaining liquid water would exist only deep beneath the frozen crust of oceans and lakes, and any areas still retaining heat would be shrinking by the day. For the small number of humans still alive, survival would depend entirely on underground shelters or geothermal heat sources. The Earth's core, still burning at extreme temperatures, would provide some warmth, but it would not be enough to sustain large populations. Those who had the resources and foresight to create underground bunkers would be among the last remnants of human civilization, but even they would be struggling with dwindling food and energy supplies. Hydroponic farming, which relies on artificial light, might allow for some food production, but the challenge would be keeping power sources running long term. The disappearance of the sun would also have profound effects on Earth's atmosphere. Without sunlight heating the planet, the air would continue to grow colder and denser, causing atmospheric gases to condense and fall as frozen particles. Over time, the air would become thinner, making it harder to breathe. The oxygen levels would drop slowly but steadily, adding yet another challenge to survival. In the absence of the sun's gravitational pull, Earth would continue on its existing trajectory for some time, but its orbit would eventually become unstable. Our planet would likely drift through space, no longer held in balance by the sun's gravity. This could mean a slow, aimless journey through the dark void, or in a worst-case scenario, Earth could be pulled into the gravitational influence of another celestial body. If that happened, the planet could be drawn into a catastrophic collision, or thrown into an unpredictable path through space. Meanwhile, the solar system itself would be completely transformed. The other planets, no longer orbiting the sun, would also drift off into space. The once bright and active solar system would become a collection of frozen, wandering worlds. The outer planets, like Jupiter and Saturn, which are already far from the sun, would experience little immediate change. But the inner planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, would become lifeless, frozen spheres just like Earth. Back on Earth, the deep ocean waters, which had been some of the last places to retain heat, would finally succumb to the cold. Any marine life that had survived this long would now be gone. The ocean floors, which had been heated by geothermal vents, might still have some small pockets of warmth, but without a steady supply of nutrients, even these ecosystems would eventually collapse. By this point, nearly all surface life would be extinct. The only possible survivors would be microorganisms and extremophiles, organisms that thrive in extreme environments. These tiny life forms, buried deep in the ice or near geothermal vents, might continue to exist for a while, but without any source of energy beyond what little heat remained from the Earth's core, even they would face extinction in the long run. As Earth continued its silent journey through the cosmos, the planet would resemble a frozen rock drifting through space, lifeless and dark. The landscapes that once held bustling cities, forests, and oceans would now be buried under thick layers of ice, frozen in time. Any evidence of human civilization would slowly be buried beneath the frozen surface, leaving behind nothing but a silent world, abandoned in the void. As we wrap up, we'll explore the ultimate fate of Earth and whether there would be any chance, no matter how small, that life could ever return. With Earth now a frozen wasteland drifting through the dark void of space, the final stage of its existence would be set in motion. The planet, once vibrant and full of life, would have become an unrecognizable icy sphere. Without the sun's warmth, no seasons would change, no winds would blow, and no life would stir on the surface. Earth would be a silent world, lost in the endless expanse of the universe, and over time the last traces of the atmosphere would disappear. The cold would cause any remaining gases to freeze and fall to the surface, creating an even thicker layer of ice. Without an atmosphere, Earth's protection against cosmic radiation and space debris would be gone. Meteors and asteroids would strike the planet's surface more frequently, leaving deep impact craters that would never erode away. Any remaining structures from human civilization, skyscrapers, bridges, or monuments, would eventually collapse under the weight of ice or be shattered by the force of space collisions. Beneath the frozen surface, the Earth's core would continue to generate heat for thousands, possibly millions, of years. This internal warmth might allow some deep-sea hydrothermal vents to persist for a while, but without a sun to sustain the global ecosystem, even these last refugees of life would eventually die out. In time, Earth's core would cool, its magnetic field would weaken, and the planet would become completely geologically inactive. No more earthquakes, no more volcanic eruptions, just a frozen rock floating through space. The fate of Earth from this point forward would depend on chance. It could wander the cosmos indefinitely, a lost planet with no destination. If it drifted close to another star, there might be a slim possibility that it could be captured by that star's gravity and warmed once again. However, the odds of this happening are almost non-existent. More likely, Earth would continue its endless journey, moving farther into the darkness, with no hope of revival. As for the remnants of humanity, if any people had managed to survive deep underground, their chances of long-term survival would be grim. Food supplies would eventually run out, energy sources would fail, and oxygen would become scarce. Without a sustainable way to generate food and heat, even the most well-prepared underground colonies would face an inevitable end. The last humans would eventually fade away, leaving behind no one to remember the planet's once thriving history. In the grand scale of the universe, Earth's disappearance from the solar system would hardly make a difference. The other planets, also lost without the sun's gravity, would be scattered in different directions, drifting aimlessly through space. The once bright solar system, full of energy and motion, would become a collection of frozen, wandering worlds. This hypothetical scenario is a reminder of how crucial the sun is to our existence. It is not just a source of warmth and light, it is the foundation of everything we know. Without it, life on Earth would be impossible, and all traces of our civilization would eventually vanish. While this is only a what-if situation, it highlights just how fragile our existence truly is in the vastness of space. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the unknown. If you have any thoughts on this chilling scenario, let me know in the comments, and if you're interested in more mind-bending space phenomena, check out our next video, where we'll explore the mysteries of black holes and what happens if you fall into one.